What's good, BitRushers? It's Kyler, and this is BitRush Crypto. In today's video, we're going to switch things up a little bit, and instead of just doing another price analysis and price prediction here, we're going to go to something more bullish. We're going to talk about the reason why Bitcoin is bullish, or one of the many reasons why Bitcoin is bullish long term that has nothing to do with price analysis. So if you guys are interested in that, do stick around. If you want more of a TNA on the current Bitcoin price, you can go back and watch any of my past 3 Bitcoin videos. Basically, nothing's changed since then. The price is continuing to move sideways, and we're still waiting for a break up or down. If you guys would like more of a philosophical approach, that's what this video is going to be. I'm basically going to break down where we are in our current economic system and where we would be going headed in that direction if we didn't have Bitcoin, and then now having the insertion of Bitcoin into the timeline, how that kind of saves the world and puts us back on a path of correction. And we're going to essentially break down why Bitcoin's going to save the world, okay? So if that's not bullish enough for you guys, I don't know what is. But if that sounds good, make sure you guys stick around. Go ahead and sub to the channel if you're not already. Bell to be notified. Members only get you a few extra perks. Links in the description for all of my social media and investment projects. Go ahead and tap on the thumbs up on this one, and let's get into the content. So, why will Bitcoin save the world? That's probably what you're wondering, and that's exactly what I'm going to answer for you today. The first thing we need to understand about Bitcoin is its deflationary nature versus the inflationary nature of most fiat currencies. I'm not going to get in depth into all the technicals here, but essentially built into the algorithm of Bitcoin is a halving event that every 4 years, the new supply of Bitcoin is cut in half. That event is called the halving. You'll hear a lot about it every 4 years if you're in the cryptocurrency sphere. And it's a pretty big deal because essentially the total new supply created by miners is getting cut in half, and that reduces their likelihood to sell at lower prices, thus driving up the price of Bitcoin. In addition to this, there is actually a finite, limited amount of fixed supply of Bitcoin. There can only ever be a certain number of Bitcoin in creation total. This adds another layer to why the value continues to increase, because it's not just increasing based on time, based on the halving, it's also increasing based on the amount of people involved. So the more people that get into Bitcoin, the more people that buy Bitcoin, the more people that hold Bitcoin, the price will continue to rise. This is what led a lot of people to criticize Bitcoin in the past and kind of call it basically a Ponzi scheme with no one in control, or something like that, people like to say. But it's much different than a Ponzi scheme. So the way that a Ponzi scheme works is you need to continually get new people, and you take the money from the new investors to pay out your old investors. So without new investors, the whole system dies because there's no new money in to keep the whole system running, continuing to pay people off and make them think they're making sick gains, when in fact all they're doing is taking the money from the new investors. That's the way a Ponzi scheme works. Very much different than Bitcoin. Bitcoin does not rely on new investors. It's just like an added bonus, like an exponential, multiplier. So the more people that get in is going to multiply it, but that's not what keeps Bitcoin running. What actually keeps Bitcoin running is one of the oldest economic systems in the world, and that is simply supply and demand, right? So we don't need new customers to come in to increase the value and to keep the system working like a Ponzi would. Bitcoin is just using supply and demand economics. So the more people that get in increases the demand, and at the same time decreases the supply, right? So if I buy some Bitcoin, now there's less Bitcoin on the market, and I still want more Bitcoin, so I have more demand. This is just increasing demand and reducing supply. So it's very simple, not a Ponzi scheme. If you guys didn't understand that, that's one of the first things you need to kind of understand about Bitcoin, is that deflationary mechanics built into it, and the fact that every 4 years the new supply will be cut in half, and the more people that get in, the demand is only increasing and the supply is staying the same or being reduced. This is something very powerful, and for the first time, essentially, other than gold, we have something in, as regular human beings that we can hold on to that we know will be worth more money in the future. Obviously there's ups and downs, ebb and flows in the market. We just recently saw a huge 40 to 50% correction in the market. So there are these type of things that happen, but over the long term, if you zoom out and look at Bitcoin on the macro, it's always continued to go up, and most likely in the future will always continue to go up. So the first time we now have something that we can hold on to, we know is going to be worth more. I have $1 worth today. In 1 year, I should have $2 worth or $3 worth or $4 worth, holding that same value amount. Bitcoin has many great features and many uses and many reasons why it will be amazing, such as peer-to-peer, decentralization, 100% ownership, being a trustless network. Possibly its most important feature and asset to us is the ability to hold and increase value, a hedge against inflation, and a safe investment that can easily be bought, stored, traded, sold, and transferred. Bitcoin really is the most powerful economic tool that you can personally own, that you can have in your portfolio, single-handedly going to change the economic system of our current world. And here's why. Before we can really get into why Bitcoin's so powerful and such a disruptive technology to our economic system, we need to further dig deep into where we find ourselves on the timeline in the economic, catastrophe that we find ourselves in here in 2021 going into 2022. So if you guys aren't familiar with Keynesian economics, essentially this is the system that arose during the Depression after the World War, during the World War. There wasn't a lot of money around. People were saving their money. They didn't want to spend it on anything. Main things people would purchase were the staples, food, homes, things like that, clothing, just not really spending a lot of money on anything, just, being real frugal, and, the economy was down. There wasn't a lot of money to have, so people were not frivolous with their money whatsoever. Every penny was counted. Everything was accounted for. People needed bargains and good deals. And to fix that and kind of, stimulate the economy and get spending again, they put, essentially that spending first. So they put the most important thing as spending and as the entire system. And so we focused on giving loans to people and giving money into the system, with the number one thing that money was being spent. As long as money was being spent, that the economy would flourish. It didn't matter how much debt anyone was in. As long as people spent money, overall the economy was doing well. And as a result of that, we find ourselves today in the exact opposite mindset, where people have basically unlimited amounts of money to spend because it's all on credit. It's not theirs. They can get a loan. They can put up, whatever they do have, things, leverage, put up a car, put up, part of their house and get more equity. There's a lot of things we can do here to continue to borrow, spend. And people don't really look at the value of a dollar anymore the way they used to. They're like, $8 for a Starbucks, $15 for a cheeseburger, just all kinds of ridiculous stuff that you can just go out there and spend your money on, guys. People are no longer bargain shoppers. They don't look for deals. Basically, we're in like a throwaway system where as soon as something breaks or goes wrong, we just throw it away and buy a new one. Every year there's a new iPhone or a new Galaxy, a new car model. You can't have a car that's more than like 2 or 3 years old, right? You got to always keep upgrading and get a new one, trade the old one in. You never actually own it. You just own a piece of it. And so this is where we find ourselves today, is as a result of those economic systems and policies that were put in place, where the value of money was basically not looked at as anything, and the most important thing in the total economic system was spending. Even furthermore, we have this system compounded by a government system making policies that lean towards heavy inflation rather than deflation. And so, there's certain things that can be done with money. And to create that money, you need basically to, build more value, right? That's one way to get more money. That's the main way to get more money, is to increase value in something. But that's the slow way, and the government doesn't have time to do that. So what they can do is just print more money, and by the time that money hits the system, it has a much less effect. So they can spend the money before the inflation hits the system and affects things. So they print, an extra $1 trillion and spend that $1 trillion on whatever they need: new roads, new bridges, stimulus checks to go out to people, whatever. And we're all happy. The money's all getting spent and everything's the same, because the result of that money hitting the system hasn't affected things yet. But after several years, or after even several months possibly, of heavy spending, heavy inflation, we start to see a dilution in the value, and then an increase in the price and things. And we're starting to see that now, where we see people making jokes on the internet that lumber costs more than anything, and food values are going up. Just in general, all the commodities, the basic things, the price is going up. And the reason is because it costs more to get these things. The value of the dollar has gone down, so now it costs more dollars to get the same amount of things, because the total value is less. Okay, it doesn't matter how many dollars you have, it matters what the value of your dollar is. And right now we don't have any value in our dollar. It's no longer backed by gold, right? It hasn't been around since, I don't know what year, but at least 50 years. We haven't had gold-backed currency for a long time now. And so essentially the only thing that puts value in our dollar is that we say it has value. It's like when you're playing Monopoly, like you buy someone's house with a Monopoly dollar. They're willing to accept that currency because they're using that currency in the game. While we're all playing that game, we all accept that as a viable form of currency. It's the same thing in real world. Like the just a regular world, everyone sees the US dollar as the currency, so we all accept that as currency. However, if you could no longer get food, shelter, water, clothes with the US dollar, you'd no longer accept them, right? If for whatever reason, you couldn't do that, you would look for something else. So what would be the value then? It would be those things, right? So, if I had a clothing shop, I could trade you for something. If I had a farm, I could trade you for something. If I could build houses, I could do that, right? These are the things that have real world value in a system that isn't built up and, put in place like we have today. Which also comes back to, just as a whole, as a society, what we place value in. Why do, a pair of sneakers cost $500? Why do we place that value in it? It's cost that much because people are willing to pay that much. If somebody, and not just somebody, but a lot of somebodies weren't willing to pay that much for something, they would not be able to charge that price, because it's not the actual value of something, right? It's the inflated value. And then on top of that, we have the inflation from the fiat. And so you guys can see that, anything like that, if you want to, get real world supplies, the value's going up. You want food, you want water, you want housing supplies, lumber, all these things, the value will continue to go up as the government continues to spend and spend and spend and print and print and print. Now, insert the hero into the story, Mr. B, Bitcoin. So why is Bitcoin going to save the world? If you can see that we're currently going down hard, we're, buying stupid stuff, plastic and, just garbage that gets thrown away and broken, filling our landfills with all this shit. The environment is going downhill. But as long as I can post a selfie on social media, it's all good. And insert Bitcoin, right? So here we go. Now we have something that is an opt-out of that system. You can look at that system and say this system is trash. Whoever put this in place did so because at the time they needed to do that, right? Coming out of a depression, they had to get the spending going. But you can opt out of this system with Bitcoin. For the first time, we can buy something and say, I know that in the future this is going to be worth more, while keeping fiat is going to be worth less. The more Bitcoin I buy will be the more value I can transfer to my family, to my kids, to my grandkids. And this is very similar to gold. of the past, except for gold in the past was very hard to get and super expensive based on that. It was hard to transfer, it was hard to protect, you had to worry about thieves, you had to build a, like a fortified area with a safe and guards and whatever if you wanted to hold a large amount of gold. With Bitcoin, you don't need that. You don't need to check your 10,000 pounds of Bitcoin when you fly in an airplane. All you need is your cell phone, your laptop, even a piece of paper. You can have a paper wallet, guys. So you can transfer millions, even billions of dollars around potentially using a tiny piece of paper, a cell phone, a wallet. You can store it, protect it, true ownership. The government cannot take it. It's the only thing known to man, I think, at this point that your government cannot take from you without your private keys, right? Obviously, if they get your private keys and they get access or whatever, but other than that, it's one of those things that, like your land, your car, your income, it can all be taxed, it can be seized. They can forcibly come in and take it. No one can take your Bitcoin if they do not have your private keys. It's physically impossible to do. So now I can opt out of the old system, opt into the Bitcoin system, and know that with deflationary value, with supply and demand economics, that more and more people are only going to hop on the bandwagon, are going to want this asset that increases value every single year, that these big companies that are making tons of money, just basically wrecking people on their credit, are now starting to get in. We're seeing these Chases, JP Morgans, all these big banking companies are now getting into Bitcoin. Why? Because they realize that if someone can opt out and buy into Bitcoin instead of getting a loan, right? If I know I want to do something, it's going to cost me an extra $10. I have two ways I can go about that. I can borrow that $10 from the current banking system and pay them back at a higher rate, like basically $13 or $14, depending on what kind of crazy rate they give you. Or I can invest the money I have today. I can take $10 that I do have today, put it in Bitcoin, and in the future have an extra 10. So doubled up my money, have initial 10 to get back if I wanted, or to keep in, and have another $10 to spend. It's a better system versus losing money, I'm gaining money, okay? For children that get into this, kind of the children of the Bitcoiners that will be raised on these type of theories of Bitcoin, basically being the savior and putting a percentage of your value in Bitcoin. So if you guys aren't familiar with that, you should always pay yourself at least 10% of any dollar that you can earn back to yourself into an investment. If you guys don't know about The Richest Man in Babylon, I have that audio book available for free on my channel. I'll link it in the description below. Go listen to that. It's really great. That's where that comes from, is pay yourself first. But, the kids that are raised on this, on getting 10% of everything they earn, putting it back into an investment like Bitcoin, they're going to continue to see their value go, where they're putting 10% in, 10% in, 10% in, and then in a few years, that 10% is now 300% of their portfolio, right? Like 10 times more than everything that they didn't put in. And it's just going to increase and increase and increase till more and more and more and more people are putting their money into Bitcoin. And then to compound that, we add in Gresham's Law. So Gresham's Law is that people will always spend the least valuable currency. This happened back in the day when we got rid of silver out of our U.S. currency. People would spend the copper coins and keep the full silver coins. They'd pull them out of circulation and save them because they had more value. This is still going on today. And the same thing is that if you have Bitcoin and you know your Bitcoin is going to be worth more money tomorrow, and you know your USD is going to be worth less money tomorrow, which one are you going to spend? You're going to spend your USD, right? Because you know it's going to lose value. And at the same time, you're going to look to keep and never spend your Bitcoin. It's going to be your savings because it only continues to increase, guys, over the long term. Obviously, it goes up and down, not financial advice, all that. Do your own research and due diligence, but look at dollar cost averaging, look at stock to flow model. Bitcoin is only going to deflate over time. The supply is fixed. They're never going to create a larger amount. You can try to come out with other coins and things like that. That's why you're seeing things like Dogecoin that have a much larger supply, easier for them to manipulate and do things with. The one true king, guys, is Bitcoin. It will always be Bitcoin. Bitcoin will, in fact, save the world. In the future, we'll see a system that is now based on saving money, on increasing value, on adding value to things. Why would I spend $7 on a Starbucks coffee if I know I can spend that $7 on Bitcoin, and next week that $7 is going to be worth $10, possibly $14, maybe $30, and then I can buy 3 Starbucks if I wanted, or I can put that back into my Bitcoin and only continue to increase value, right? People aren't going to spend frivolously. And people that are trying to sell things are going to have to provide actual value, not just a name and branding. That will definitely be key to compete, but you're going to have a better product. It's going to lead to people actually going back to quality craftsmanship, creating things that last longer, because people aren't going to want to spend their Bitcoin on anything that's garbage, and people aren't going to want garbage in general, right? They'll continue to spend their fiat, and you're already seeing countries, guys. We're seeing South American countries, other countries starting to look at Bitcoin, put it on their balance sheet, make it an official currency. Why? Because as the reasons I mentioned earlier, it's easier for them to manage than, different inflation and different corrupt politicians coming in and just like printing money and doing different things. It's just so much easier to be on this system, and the system of your people is increasing in value. You're basically giving something to the future children of your country. These guys that are doing this are amazing. They're going to go down as heroes, not just in their country, but in the world. The first people to give the people of their country a brighter future. That the more Bitcoin you hold in your wallet, you're going to increase in value. Their countries will become some of the richest countries in the future because they were some of the earliest adopters, which is why I think, I hate to say it, but the United States is going to hold back, even though we're being nice and playing well with Bitcoin, trying to regulate it. I don't think we're ever going to see full-on adoption because USD is the main currency in the world, and we're going to want to fight that. I think if anything, what their USD is going to try to do is, create their own US dollar digital that's kind of like their own Bitcoin to kind of compete. I think would be probably the route they're going to go, or they're going to secretly buy up a bunch of Bitcoin before they do it, right? The only way the US government is going to switch to Bitcoin altogether is if they can control a good portion of it. You can never control the network altogether, but they need to have a large enough value that they're whales. So unless we start to see them buy up, I don't see that happening. Instead, I do see Bitcoin continuing to be an opt-out like a gold, where people are just holding a percentage of their value. We know that the government's going to mess with our system, and Bitcoin's actually going to save them, right? So this is the part where we get to, okay, we still haven't said how it's going to save it. It's obviously going to help all the people who buy Bitcoin. We've already covered that, but how's it going to actually save our economy and save our system? And this is it right there. I don't think that we're going to adopt Bitcoin, and it's going to be too hard to compete against it. And so instead, we're going to have to fix our economic system, guys. We're going to have to stop all the money printing. We're going to have to end the Keynesian economic model, and we're going to have to go back to something closer to Bitcoin with our real currency, with our fiat. Turn our fiat into something of value where, you actually want to hold a USD versus another, a Canadian note or a Mexican note or a European note, or whatever, a Chinese note, any of these. Why is the US dollar better, right? We need to set that economy up and build it here. And I think Bitcoin will be a catalyst for that, because the future people going into power, if they're raised on the Bitcoin model, this will be the model that they know. This will be, what the philosophy is in their mind and how we need to do things, how we need to fix things. And that will be the backbone to kind of look at and say, here is the example that we need to lay out and make our economy work. I hope that wasn't too much rambling, guys, me talking about why I love Bitcoin and why it's so amazing and why it will only continue to increase value over time, why it holds so much power. Having that wallet, having those coins in your hand is basically, freedom. I'm a libertarian here in the USA, so, Bitcoin to me is just everything I love. Everything that a economic system, everything that a currency should be is Bitcoin. Bitcoin will save the world. If you guys enjoyed this video and listened to me ramble on about why I love Bitcoin and how Bitcoin's going to save the world, go ahead and leave a thumbs up, and also leave a comment. Let me know if you like this style of content. Make sure you throw it on social media, share it with a friend or family member, someone who doesn't understand Bitcoin maybe and wants to go down the rabbit hole a little bit more and learn some of these philosophies about why Bitcoin is so great. Other than that, happy crypto, and let's get that coin.